Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 33 of the Lebanese Biodiversity Podcast. My name is Mira, and I am an entomologist. My guest today is Hicham El Zein, a naturalist and plant expert who has been active in flora conservation for the last decade. We focus on his main project for the last few years, the Red List of the Plants of Lebanon. Before we go into more detail, what is a red list? How is it made? And what criteria does it use? How are plants labeled as endangered? And what does this mean? All of this leads us to a better understanding of the work that Hicham and his colleagues did on the Red List of the Plants of Lebanon. Join us as we discuss some of the results of his work and how we can move forward from here. I hope you enjoyed this episode and see you in the next one. Hello, Hicham. How are you today?
Hi Mira, I'm good. What about you?
I'm fine. Realizing that it's been a while since I haven't recorded an interview in English. So, first, thank you for agreeing to do this and for coming on the podcast for the second time
Thanks a
to
lot.
talk about your work.
Thanks to you.
Can, well, you're welcome. It's a pleasure. Can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about yourself and your background?
I've been working in botany and conservation, plant conservation in Lebanon for around 13 years. And actually, since I'm quite young, I'm obsessed with plants. And yeah, this is for me the natural progression of someone who is obsessed with plants. Loving plants directly leads you to be in nature, like most of the time. Not only in Lebanon, but mostly in Lebanon, witnessing nature destruction, and then it goes beyond, like only studying plants from a botanical perspective. It really touches you to the soul and takes you to nature conservation. And at the end, you're using the botanical knowledge and you're using everything you know about the fragility of nature and biodiversity to argument and build a narrative of conservation and presenting plants patrimony as something very, very unique that we have and that we should preserve.
You are convinced that plants are worth protecting, and to prove to everyone else that they are worth protecting, you need to use all of your knowledge on them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're the basis of all the other creatures. And yeah, this is something I really want to highlight since the beginning. Like, okay, we're doing conservation and we're doing red list about plants, but
Yeah.
finally, these plants are like ambassadors of the real environmental crisis that we are facing. And people would go and say, ah, this little plant is endangered, but then what about that? No, it's like the habitat of this plant is endangered, and its habitat is actually our landscapes, our nature, our natural heritage in Lebanon. So everything that we have that is called wild is currently threatened, and we have to react as quick as possible to to stop this massacre. Sometimes you know this feeling you come back from a, I don't know, 1 or 2 days or 3 days of field trip in the mountains, and okay, it's full of wonderful experience and surprises, but there's always this point during the day where you face like a quarry or a new, I don't know, building construction or a new road that they're trying to build a new road in the middle of a beautiful slope full of forest, and they are like cutting down like trees that are, I don't know how many years old, maybe like 1,000 years old. And then you just go back home and you feel like, wow, this is so ephemeral, and maybe we're witnessing the last pieces of nature in this country. I know the trend is global, but I mean, in Lebanon, because everything is small and the area of the country is super limited, I think the pace of loss is quite high. So yeah, I mean, it gets you, okay, I want to conserve, but sometimes I feel super low energy. I go back home like, is this useless? All this red list. I mean, assessing the the risk of extensions of plants and habitat that might actually disappear in 2 weeks, 2 years, 20 years. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you'll tell us a bit more about your work on the red list in a few minutes or seconds, but I agree that there is no easy way to answer that. I mean, I think that it's worth it, of course, but you sometimes have the impression that getting the message across is much slower than the habitat destruction itself.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
mainly,
Yeah, also that the most of the decisions to for a new project, um, I mean destruction of nature, is usually not publicly made. So most of the public, the neighbors of the region doesn't know, and you will just wake up in the morning and you see the machines on the on the land, like cutting trees and opening a road. You're like, ah, okay, this is quite.
it's
It's
done
always
now.
it's
Yeah.
surprising, you know.
So
Anyway.
how did how did it start? You were interested in plants since you were a child, but you started working on plants like professionally or being involved in plant conservation around a decade ago. What was the very first project you worked on? By curiosity, if you want to share that.
Yeah, of course. Um, the first one was not in Lebanon. I was in the French Alps, and it was about so doing also fauna and flora assessments. And this is a bit outside of the academic research field. It's more about environmental impact assessments. And therefore, in the same office, I was working with landscapers and engineers and people who were actually aiming to carry on this project of construction, you know. And so they were doing like the environmental impact assessment, like on the side. Okay, you just go and find out if there's something. If not, it's okay. We can continue with the project. And like
Okay,
two
I
times,
see.
we discovered. I mean, I wasn't alone, but yeah, it was my fault. Endangered species at the national level. I mean, protected, endangered, and then protected because in France, um, when you found the species endangered at the national level and protected, you just stop the project. And so the reaction of my colleagues were not so so nice, and they got offended. Even the director. One time, it was like a caterpillar of a butterfly that feeds only on the family of the Crassulaceae.
Mm-hmm.
It's like succulent plants. And it
Yeah.
was the Apollon. Apollon is a
Yeah,
butterfly
that's
protected.
protected in Europe and in the entirety of Europe, actually.
Exactly. So when you found out on the construction site, the project is blocked. And another one was a lycop. It's like a kind of fern, not really. It looks like a moss. So not really not appealing, creatures.
Yeah.
So even in the office, the colleagues were like, "What?" And the Apollon also doesn't have like like glamorous colors. It's like white with like two
Yeah,
red
white with
points.
red dots.
And they were like, "What?
Okay.
We're stopping our project for this."
Okay,
This is
well,
how
thank you.
one of my first examples of red listing actually already made, because in France it was already used,
Yeah.
and how it can really block a project, which is unfortunately not the case yet in Lebanon.
Yes, so the problem also in Lebanon is that we still don't have lists of protected plants, and this is where the red list comes in. Before talking more about moving towards lists of protected plants and the conservation plan, is the Lebanese flora well known, well documented? And my follow-up question would be, well, if we know the plants of Lebanon well, do we already have a conservation plan? Do we already have, anything that was done in that direction?
Yeah, the flora of Lebanon is quite well documented. It's one of the most well documented flora in the region. I think even the Turkish flora is not as well as documented. Well, first, Turkey is huge, and a lot of mountains are still underexplored. And
Mm-hmm.
Lebanon was very famous from the French colony, let's say.
Yeah.
So the French
Mandate,
people used to
mandate.
mandate, yeah. They used to send a lot of naturalists, these people who used to, for Mother France, document nature in the colonized countries. And Lebanon was like very famous, and they used to, most of the flora has been documented by French botanists. A lot of drawings, a lot of herbarium specimens still in Paris and also in Switzerland. So yeah, it's and like since maybe the 1830 was the peak of documentation on the Lebanese flora. Now, of course, we still have like some surprises, some valleys underexplored, some species that are similar to other species, and finally we discovered that no, actually they are a species on their own, so we can describe them as new species for science. So this can still happen, but I mean we're not in the Amazonia, of course, and we are still have a quite, a very well-known flora,
Okay.
and yeah, as you said, like the conservation management, the management of this flora is not really well, I mean, managed. Just say that there is no like national plan to protect this flora. And the first goal, I think, of the creation of nature reserve in Lebanon was focusing mainly on the forest of cedars, and it was not taking into account this other part of the natural patrimony, because cedars are not unique to Lebanon. They're also distributed in Turkey
Mm.
and Syria and Cyprus, the same species. And the unique flora, unique species of the flora we have are not cedars, so they are more like herbaceous plant species that are located at the alpine, we say alpine, it's not the real word, Euro-Mediterranean level, above
Okay. At high
2,000
altitudes. Yeah.
meters. And this is like the real heart of the diversity. And for these areas and these species, there's nothing that has been done yet. Most of the alpine or Mediterranean region is not protected. The government focused mainly on the forest of cedars until now.
Okay, so we have a good knowledge of the flora as a whole, even though discoveries are still possible. But for the moment, the only plants that have any kind of consideration or protections are the ones of cultural significance. Well, which is also important. It's also important to protect plants of cultural significance, but the plants that are actually endangered, from what you tell us, we know that they are probably vulnerable or endangered or more, but for the moment, nothing more is being done for their conservation.
Yeah, exactly. The cedars are very important, and most of the trees and the forest, in terms of habitat, are very important for the ecosystemic services they're providing to humanity. Like they're preventing soil erosion, climate change. They are giving us, humidity, cloud formation, rain. All this is very important, but it's not very known from the public, even from the people in the government, let's say, of the ministries, that little plant species, herbaceous, that in terms of ecosystem services are maybe have less impact, that's for sure, but they're still part of the biodiversity, and they are unique to the Lebanese lands. So it's quite interesting to pinpoint them and highlight them, and make the public and also the stakeholders aware about this unique plant diversity.
Okay. So if I like try to go back and take this step by step, we know that there are plants that we have in Lebanon that are unique to Lebanon and that need protection. So the first step would be to produce some kind of document that explains the threats that these plants face. And the second step would be based on that document that explains the dangers that they face, say, what can we do to protect them? So, where are we at now? You have been working for quite some time now on the red list of the plants of Lebanon. Can you explain to us what the red list is, how it falls into that procedure of reaching a point where we have a conservation plant for plants, sorry, getting there. And yeah, maybe we can start with this. Sorry, that was an
Yes.
extremely long question, but you get
No,
the point.
no, no. We should have begun with talking about the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which is a non-governmental association, IUCN, mostly known under the short name IUCN, and they
Okay.
created this red list for threatened species, um, where they gave what we can call global conservation status for all creatures like animal, fungi, plants. And this conservation status is like evaluation of the risk of extinction of the animal or the plant or the fungi. Um, so it gives like stakeholders, public, researchers an estimation on how endangered a species is, and it is really useful for, of course, land spatial management to know, oh, okay, in this region we have these creatures, plants, animals that are endangered, and if we don't protect this area, these animal and plants will go extinct and they will disappear forever. Um, so this is the main goal of the red list of IUCN. Of course, it doesn't have any legal um, impact. I mean, locally, it's not the IUCN because it's red listed and it's like considered as endangered that the government is forced to create a management on these species. To it just gives an estimation, and country should be aware of it. The government should be aware of it. But there's nothing that force, the country. If the country doesn't respect it, then there's no like fee that the government will have to pay. Unfortunately,
Okay,
but
but
I wish it would come in the future.
yeah, I mean, there are always more steps to do. So after you say, hey, this plant is in danger, you can use that document, from what I understand, as an argument to push for protection laws. But yeah, as you say, making a red list is not a guarantee that you will have protection laws, and then having protection laws is not a guarantee that there will be actual repercussions if the habitat of this plant is destroyed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And therefore, this IUCN red list uses like 9 categories. If you want, I can explain a bit
Sure.
the different categories.
Yes, yes, yes. It's the objective.
So, I mean, there's like there are 9 categories. The first one is commonly known as not evaluated. So we don't know. I mean, nothing has been done yet for the assessment of the species. We have data deficient species, for species for which we have like insufficient information. We have least concern. The assessment was done for this species and it's not currently at risk of extinction. We have the other one called near threatened. When the species is near threatened, it's almost at the gates of being threatened, but not yet. So it's still like in a green zone, let's say. Then we enter into what we call the threatened categories, which are vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered. So vulnerable, the species is at high risk, let's say, and like any kind of threats or event could lead the species to endangered. Endangered, when a species is endangered, that's it. It's in the red zone. It is at high risk of extinction. This is, I mean, one of the category when a species is classified as endangered. It is it's in the priority of conservation management. Then you have like the extreme called critically endangered. And for these species classified as critically endangered, they are at extreme risk of extinction. So at any moment, any event, any threat could lead to the extinction of the species. And finally, there's two other categories called extinct in the wild. So obviously the species is not present anymore in the wild, but we can still find it in zoo or in botanical gardens. And finally, we got the extinct category, for which the species is not present anymore on Earth. It has totally disappeared. So these are the 9 categories. And yeah, as I told you, if you want to initiate a national plan for species conservation, we focus on vulnerable, endangered, and critically endangered to lead conservation actions and whatever. So
Okay, so it's basically a way of setting a list of priorities, a to-do list, if you will, saying, okay, this is what you need to focus on first, and then we can have a more global approach for the conservation of the flora.
yeah, exactly. This is really like it gives us like guidelines on what species we should focus for the
Yeah, on which are
conservation
on
actions.
which need the more urgent intervention or non-intervention. Quite often the instruction will be leave it alone. You still need to go through the procedure to conclude in the end, okay, now to protect it, please leave it alone. Can you give us a few examples of plants or maybe just one? You started at the bottom of the danger ladder with the least
Exactly.
concern, which is okay, it's probably doing fine, and then going up to critically endangered that is on the verge of disappearing. So, what would be an example of a plant that is least concern or that is most probably least concern in Lebanon? Something that we don't have a risk of seeing disappear in the coming years.
Um, yeah, according to our assessments, I would say like Berberis libanotica uh, is. I mean, we assessed it at as the least concern,
Okay,
and I think it's
interesting.
quite known from
It's the alpine shrub with
exactly,
beautiful
yeah,
yellow flowers, right? And it's very
yellow
spiny.
flowers,
Okay.
and yeah, it's quite known. This one is quite known from the public actually, because
Yeah,
whenever
yeah,
you
yeah.
go on the highlands, Jalud, as we say in Arabic,
Yeah.
I mean, most likely you will see it, and especially if it's in flower or even when it carries the berries,
The
because the
berries,
berries
yeah.
they're used traditionally since a very long time. They are medicinal and they're used for food also, like resins.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Then you assessed it as least concern. Can you tell us a bit more, the rationale behind this? How did you conclude that it was not endangered?
Concerning the assessment of Berberis libanotica, we assessed it as least concern. Um, Before going like giving you the assessment like this, I need to introduce some of the aspect of the assessment. For assessing a plant or an animal, we're using criteria. There are 5 criteria used in IUCN red listing, and like 3 of them they deal with species distribution. So how is the species distributed? Is it located only I mean, in many countries, is it found only in the Mediterranean region? Is it found only on a mountain range, or only, for example, in these little mountains of the Levant? Only found in Lebanon, only found on Mount Saint. So this gives the scale of the distribution of the plant or the animal. And there are also other criterion that are using the generation length, so how the population of the species evolves through time. Maybe this one is the most complicated to use with plants, as we don't really know the generation length for many plants, or also that because some of the plants have very long generation length. If you take the example of trees that can live up to, I don't know, 1,000 years, it's easier, of course, to use this criterion when you deal with animals such as birds or insects that have a generation length of 5 years, 2 years, 3 years. You can properly study, I mean, during the life of the assessor. Okay, this species, I witnessed the life, I don't know, 3 generations. They're moving from there to there, they're feeding on that, and then they die and they reproduce in this region. It's easier than plants, whereas you don't even know sometimes how to differentiate one individual. So let's go back to Beverly Sybiotica. Using these categories, we directly, knowing that Babelis levantica is an endemic plant species that grows only in the mountain ranges of Lebanon and, I mean, of Mount Lebanon, Anti-Lebanon,
Okay.
and Mount Hermon. So it is
Okay.
quite limited, in terms of area. So we directly can narrow down and use criterias that already tell us, okay, this plant has a very limited distribution. Then we have to use other, I mean, we call it side criterias, in which we take into consideration the threats. So these species, I don't know, Berberis lebanotica could be present, could occur only on the mountain summit of, I don't know, Barouk. Barouk is a mountain in Lebanon, and most of Jabal Barouk, Mount Barouk, is in a nature reserve, the Shuf biosphere. And we can think, or we can say that, okay, there's no threat in a nature reserve. Well, this is not true, of course. There are always threats everywhere.
Okay.
Sometimes we don't really know. But this is an example because, okay, we could say the species is very narrowly distributed, but it's present only in nature reserve, and there it's super well managed. So actually, the species is not threatened. Then this is where the threats are super important. So for Babelis lebanotica, we have many threats. Um, we have threats that are directly targeting the species. I mean, not because people, are exploiting the species. Of course, yeah, I told you before, it's medicinal, and it's also, you can harvest wild berries from it, but people don't really destroy it. It's mostly like what people do in the habitat. I mean, you have like constructions, you have quarries when they extract minerals from the land. You have road constructions. Sometimes you have fire. And in the case of Bevelis Lebanon, which is quite an interesting case, we don't really have the threat of overgrazing. Okay, goats will go definitely to eat new, shoots of the plants or branches, flowers or berries even. But most of the plants is quite thorny, and it's quite difficult for the goats to really um, reach the bottom of the shrub. It's a shrub that can reach
Yeah.
to 2 meters. Sorry, I didn't tell you. And therefore, yeah, the plant is not really threatened. Like there's not a lot of threats on it, and also it's never directly targeted. So this is a quite interesting example because it's endemic to Lebanon. It has a very narrow distribution. I mean, on the global scale, but
Yeah.
it's not directly threatened, and it's quite strong and resilient. It creates like massive, groups of shrubs that, you cannot walk through them. It's impossible.
Yeah.
You
But
get
like
like,
with your premise, with your introduction, we could have thought that this plant is endangered only because it has a very small distribution. But when you look at the context that it grows in and the fact that it's actually a resilient plant that is able to thrive under these conditions and is not heavily affected by grazing, in this case, even this plant that is restricted to the alpine or to the high altitudes can actually be least concern because there is no reasonable reason to think that it has a threat to its survival.
yeah, exactly. This is a very important example. It gives like the contrast of the threat because, yeah, it's, as you said, on the Oro Mediterranean level, the Alpine level, and this place nowadays is super targeted with a lot of construction projects, roads, quarries. This is really crazy. But yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You can identify threats, but you have to know the species. You cannot just go and make an assessment for a species you never seen, you don't know anything about. You have to go on the field, you have to observe, you have to see how the species is dealing with the threats. How does it react along seasons? You have to go there in winter, you have to go in summer, you have to understand everything. So you have to be, intimate with the species. Doing assessment really requires like knowing well the habitat and the species, the ecology, how it reacts. It's a lot of time. That's why I think we need to spend like years with the species to really be able to carry out a proper assessment.
Well,
And
what's
another
your
point I would say, maybe the main threat on the main threat on Melveris Baltica is climate change. Actually, in this case, because most of the species of the Euro-Mediterranean region are directly facing the climate change threat, which is quite potent. Obviously, we already see last winter in Lebanon, we got like little rainfall, almost no snow cover. And most of the Euro-Mediterranean species will not carry on long with this kind of drought events and. So also something that we need to study more deeply.
luckily the assessment is not something that is static. In a sense, you are supposed, ideally, to go back there like 10 or 15 years later, re-examine the conditions, and see if least concern is still appropriate. But you just mentioned climate change, so if in 10 or 15 years, or whenever you get a chance to redo a flora assessment, or a red list of the plants of Lebanon, I'm getting there. And you see that now Berberis libanatica is, more vulnerable because of climate change or because of reduced snow, then it can change. What I'm saying is that when you put a status on the species now, it's not eternal. You can reassess it and it can become suddenly endangered, or it can be endangered and then it can become least concern after years of conservation efforts because its habitat is now well preserved and well protected.
Yeah, this is a very interesting point. Of course, we have to reassess ideally every 10 years, but there are so many species that are not assessed yet. So this is not the main goal now. And if we see that, we're more, um, we put more priority in reassessing species that are critically endangered or endangered. And there are now IUCN are like encouraged to manage the endangered species and to estimate the efforts of conservation actions. And now they're putting species in the green zone, they say. So we have the red list and you have now the green list, which is quite interesting. So the species that were previously assessed into one of the three threatened categories, vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered, and now in the new assessment that are, they got requalified as a lower level of risk of extinction, they are considered like on the green list. And this is quite encouraging. And they are encouraging people to use this green list to calculate and estimate the impact of the conservation measures. And it's quite nice. You got a lot of positive examples when you navigate on the website of IUCN, where they give you, especially with animals, because animals are more like charismatic than plants, and the wide
Yeah.
public are. We see directly the effects. Okay, everyone, we're so happy that the tiger is now in the green list because thanks to our efforts to repopulate these regions and to protect these forests and I don't know, then it's not critically endangered. Now it's endangered. So this is like very good news. So this is quite an interesting thing that you mentioned.
And if we take now a least happy example, can you give us an example of a plant that is high on the danger ladder, like maybe critically endangered, and tell us why it ended up in that category?
Oh, well, in Lebanon, we have like quite a lot, I would say. During the assessment, we're not able to qualify them, all of them as critically endangered. because the criteria and all the process we have to go through is quite rigid, and sometimes,
Yeah.
I mean, even as an assessor, you feel that this species, like maybe in 10 years, will disappear. Still, it got classified as endangered. But anyway,
Yeah.
like
You
let's
have to
talk
follow
about.
the procedure, and the procedure has to be followed in a homogeneous way on everything. Otherwise, it's not fair and it's not easy to use as a conservation document.
Yeah, exactly. Also, like I want to highlight the fact that like as assessors, so we assess the species, but then it goes through. I mean, as I told you, that the process is super long because you have to go on the field, understand the species, understand the threats, everything I told you before. But
Yeah.
then once you get your report done with the maps, with everything, you have to send it to the reviewers of the IUCN, and you have groups, specialist groups for each genus, each groups of plants or animals, and people are experts in these genera, experts in these families of animal, whatever, or fungi, and they know your region also because they are like you, they are like researcher, they are like specialists, and you get your assessment being reviewed. And this is also a very interesting part because it takes a lot of time. You got the reviewer initiating a conversation with you, like, okay, but why did you put that? You have to explain, you have to argument. This is quite a long process. But anyway, so in terms of critically endangered in Lebanon, um, something interesting, like most of them are at the over Mediterranean level, which means that they grow
Okay.
above 2,000 meters of elevation. I would mm, I would like to give the example of Alchemia diademata, very low plant from the Rosaceae family of the rose of the strawberry. It looks a bit like a strawberry, by the way. It has a very narrow habitat. It grows like on sandstone. So I don't know if Lebanon, we don't have, I mean, we have a sandstone, but it's quite a rare habitat, a rare rock, a geological layer.
Okay.
It grows on sandstone, but on wet sandstone. So imagine like doubly rare habitat. So we don't
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of wetlands in Lebanon. I mean, it's a Mediterranean climate. The only place where we can get wetlands is places where we have springs or rivers or something coming out from the mountains. And unfortunately, where it grows, so it's between the land between Samin and Knese. This place is being heavily targeted by quarries. They extract the sandstone to make cement. And after 90s, after the civil war, and even before, but I mean the peak was during the 90s. This region was totally destroyed. If you get the chance to see an image on Google satellite, it's like a crater. It's like you seeing the one of the crater of the moon,
Yeah.
and they've been like heavily extracting sand only to create to produce cement in other places in Lebanon.
Okay.
And then you get the example of a plant that have a super narrow distribution. The habitat is super narrow also, like only wet sandstone, imagine, in a mountain range of Lebanon that is mostly limestone. And then it get targeted by quarries. So then you get a part of, okay, actually there's no control. It's quite chaotic. And unfortunately the government was not able to really control what was going on in this region. So at the end, got this plant that is critically endangered. And as I said at the beginning, for me, this plant is an ambassador, is a spokesperson of the habitat because the entire habitat is like under threat. And this is a unique habitat we have in terms of insects, in terms of reptiles, or whatever you want. This is a super interesting habitat. It's rare, it's unique. But now this plant is telling us that we're losing this habitat and we're losing a unique nature patrimony.
Okay, well, thank you very much for giving us the opposite example and how this plant ended up critically endangered. Again, you need a very good knowledge of the context and of the habitat. Well, I hope that the Red List will be able to help you push for slowing down the destruction of its habitat. I had more questions that had more to do with basically how did this project start and what will happen later. So maybe we can go back to the beginning, and if you want to share with us a little bit, how did this project start? And also, like, how do red lists usually start? I also speak a bit out of frustration because I have been trying to kick off a red list of bees of Lebanon for a few years now, and there are so many things that can come in the way.
So it began. I was hired as a project coordinator in a huge project that was implemented by the University of Saint Joseph, and it was led by Magda Boudar El Kharat. She was back then the director of Earth and Life Sciences, and she wrote and designed this project. It was a huge project. There was like some components like creating micro reserves and doing plant identification workshops. And one of the components of this huge project was funded by the CPF, by the way, the Critically Ecosystem Partnership Fund. One of the components was to begin the first red list for plants in Lebanon. And it was like such a massive component and project, but thanks to her, we got involved into this adventure, and I'm really grateful for to Magda for that because thanks to her, we were able to take courses about red listing, and as you know, it's very tough. We got sent in the Botanical Garden of Edinburgh for 1 week. It was very intense. Then some trainers also came to Lebanon, and then we managed to organize a national 2 times a national red list workshop where we invited most of the people in all the universities of Lebanon who work with plants, and we tried to give the workshop first to train everyone on how to assess and also to have them like contributing in terms of data because for example we had colleagues like Professor Lamis Shalak who are and her team are specialists of wild prunus, cherry, this group of plants. And also they used to work in Mount Hermon. So they had like back then access to the area. Now it's really tricky to get there. And thanks to them, we're able to assess plants from Mount Hermon. And this was like very interesting because we got all the researchers and teachers and everyone working with plants involved. And yeah, back then we were able to assess like 100 species of plants. And yeah, why did we target endemic species is because they are easier, of course, to assess, but also because they are the priority. So if this one of the species, endemic plant species, so endemic, like I mean, only occurring in Lebanon, if they if it disappears from Earth. It's not present anymore. So yeah, the first step was to assess like these like we put the goal was to assess 100 endemic species, and we did it. And then the second part is to assess the rest, like maybe mm, 80 more to go.
Okay.
But yeah, we accepted this challenge, and it is really interesting. And moreover, that now thanks to this project, we have like at least 100 species in Lebanon that have a conservation status, and we can easily now argue and ask funds to carry on conservation projects using this status because
Yeah.
before it was not the case. Like some projects, outside, most of the conservation projects in Lebanon are funded from abroad. So you
Yeah.
were writing a project about, yeah, I want to protect these plants in this valley. Okay, and they ask you, is this plant endangered? And they ask for the proper conservation status from the IUCN assessment. And before that, imagine we're not able to have these funds, and the
I
Ministry
know
of Environment was
this.
not funding.
Yeah, I know this all too well. We are stuck in this loophole for insects for as long as I can remember, and we are conscious that we have virtually no funds in the Middle East in general that
Exactly.
will consider, that will even consider funding a conservation project if you do not have a red list status. So just to like to
Yeah.
go back to what you told us,
Mhm.
you started this a few years ago, and the decision was to focus on endemic plants first, so they were the priority, because well, they will be in a more vulnerable situation than most. And also, your geographical range here, just to be clear, is only Lebanon, or do you have some plans for which you are doing regional assessments if they are endemic to the Levant, for example?
I mean, we can assess plants from the Levant, and if the plant, the species, is distributed between different countries, then we need
Mm-hmm.
to collaborate with plant researcher from these regions. Um, because I mean, I don't know, for example, the threats going on in Jordan or in Syria. This is super important, and then we can carry on a collaborative assessment. We take
Yes.
It takes much more time, but I mean, yeah, if you want to assess Levantine species, you have to go through this process. We managed to assess like maybe two or three Levantine species only. In the case of Educa sicula, the species is present in Libya, in Italy, in Cyprus, and Turkey and Lebanon. So imagine you have to talk with researchers from all these five countries.
But this was also just to clarify to people listening to us that sometimes when you do a national assessment, the plant that you will assess can exist in Lebanon, but it can also exist in other countries. But you can choose to
Ah,
do
okay.
only a national assessment for Lebanon, and for example, for A. Casicula, you can say, what is the status in Lebanon? And then you can collaborate with the people from other countries and say, what is the status in other countries? So this is also just to make the clarification that you can have more than one status for a single plant, depending on which geographical range you decided to assess it.
It's important to differentiate between the national and global assessment. As I was mentioning before, all the assessments we work on are all at the global level. If you want to give another example with a species that was assessed at the national level but is present in other countries, we can give the example of the cedars of Lebanon, Cedrus libani. This tree is distributed between Turkey, Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon. And in fact, in Lebanon, it is endangered. But when we look at the global assessment, the evaluation is different because we have to take into account the population of Turkey, Cyprus, and Syria. And each country have different national assessments. National assessments are not published on the IUCN website. It doesn't mean they're not important. It means that IUCN has too much to deal with and they cannot publish assessment at the national level for each country. And this also highlights the responsibility of each government to take care of its own natural patrimony. Therefore, the status that we see uh, about the cedars of Lebanon on the IUCN website is the global status. And even though it's endangered at the national level, it will get a different status at the global level, and so on. So there are so many species in the same case. And this is a differentiation that is very important to highlight. Maybe people they are a bit confused between the national and the global assessment. It can be then national, I mean, nationally endangered in Lebanon, and actually the species is quite well represented in other countries.
So I have a question which is a bit abstract, but if you had infinite resources and infinite budget, what are the tools and what are the means that you would need to produce the ideal conservation plan for the plants of Lebanon? So that could be like, how much time do you need? Where do we still have data gaps in Lebanon? And what resources would you need to achieve that ideal conservation plan?
That's an interesting question. Um, I think it's coming back uh, recurrently during this interview. But yeah, what is really missing at this point is awareness. This is
Okay.
something that we're not able to tackle down in Lebanon. And I'm not even talking about the responsibility of the government. We really have to reach the people and to get the people, I mean, understanding that yeah, our nature is endangered and we have to move fast. And even though it doesn't seem very important to many, because we have other priority, especially, I mean, in countries where, I mean, you have an economic crisis, you have many other issues that the people are facing. Many don't see the urgency, the emergency of, I mean, the destruction of nature and the conservation of nature. And for me, this is like where we should really put the money, get the government to tackle down this problem at the educational level. It should reach the children in the school from all ages. Then there should be like a, awareness programs for adults. There should be operations going on at the level of the municipalities. I mean, like we have like a huge work to do, and time is not sufficient, as you mentioned before. Like the pace of destruction is so fast. Yeah, this is really where I would put all the investment into raising awareness about the fragility of nature and the emergency of
Yeah.
our situation right now.
Well, I would say that in all cases, no matter how fast the rate of the destruction, it would be always worth it to invest in raising awareness to the younger generations. Because, for example, in my case, the first time I was in contact with any of this was in university. And it, like, I ended up taking this career path, but I could have known much younger, you know. I think that I discovered this too late in life. I'm like, why didn't anyone tell me before? But anyway,
Well, that is still good. It's only at the level of the university that you're conscious about nature, and it's already amazing. So
I
you see,
know, but it's
I mean,
late.
I mean, it's full of hope. I really like this piece of information.
Yeah.
Beats anyone
Well,
right now to be like from one day to another environmental activist, or
no, it
this
takes
is
time.
really
And this is also the kind of thing that forces you to look at everything. It's uncomfortable, but you kind of slide into it slowly. From the moment you start learning that these things exist, that like how much diversity we have, how vulnerable it is, and how much is needed to protect it from ourselves mainly. Was that too depressing?
mm. No, not at all.
Well,
Um,
let's turn to the future and hope, unless you have anything else to add on like what we've discussed so far in the previous section.
no, let me know about the future.
Okay, so the future. You have assessed more than 100 plants now, mainly plants that are endemic to Lebanon. What are the next steps after you have produced a red list, or at least beginning of a red list, which is already a lot of work? What are the next steps to make sure that this red list is taken into account in conservation action plans, and that, for example, natural reserves are aware of it and include it in their management plans?
We have to make this list of species available to everyone. I mean, it's already available online for since 2020. But I mean, we have to force. I want to say, but yeah, we have to force and make aware the people in the Ministry of Environment that this list exists and that at the international level, Lebanon declared to respect these red assessed species, and therefore it should take actions to prevent their extinction. And at this point, it has to be done at the regulation level. So whenever people are asking at the municipality level or at the ministry level construction permits, it should include uh, environmental impact assessment. It already does in Lebanon, but it should include the red listing approach. And the red listing approach should be more rigid. Many times I've seen like some sites being destroyed, even though the people knew that some species of plants going there were endangered. And they're trying to play with compensation measures. So no, if we only destroy, I don't know, 80% of the site, it's okay. Or what about transplanting the plants to another place? Or what about making a public garden in this place with little benches? It's okay. I mean, it's kind of greenwashing measures, you know. No, it has to be more rigid and say no. We have we have this species. You cannot do it. You have to change the location, or you have to build around it. And this is also a message I want to convey to everyone. I mean, anyone who's trying to. I mean, you have a land somewhere in Lebanon, in the mountain, on the coast, wherever, and you want to build. You want to take advantage, of course, of each square meter of your land. I mean, it's nice for everyone. This is our, I mean, commune, I would say, common responsibility to say that we are actors of that, and we should keep a little place even on our land for nature, and like not going and trying to plow every inch of our land. Say, okay, no, I'm gonna leave this bush, leave this piece of forest, leave this slope for nature, to leave the insects, the plants grow, and yeah, I mean, leave a piece for nature.
Yeah.
And this is something we have to integrate. And I mean, I don't think, as we said before about awareness, is going to come naturally from the people, and we have to force it. So the next step is to have the government taking its responsibility and force the people, and at all level, to respect this red list.
I do agree with the notion of feeling the responsibility of doing something, even if it's like in your own garden, on your own balcony. It really starts small, and it really starts with you. The ideal scenario is we have people listening to this, and they feel the sudden urge to do something for flora conservation in Lebanon. So, how can people who would like to be involved and who would like to participate in the conservation of the flora of Lebanon participate in this? How can they help gather data? What instructions or resources are there out there to help them generate plant data that can be used by people like you when working on the red list, for example?
Yeah, I mean, recently, since I would say, I mean, less than a decade, we were quite lucky. We have the development, I mean, expansion of what we call citizen science. And nowadays, there's a lot of applications on smartphones that helps people to identify directly plants. And this is quite useful sometimes. I mean, we're not able to go everywhere, even in a small country like Lebanon. And you have these websites. I can give the example of iNaturalist, which is a very nice website in which people just can upload photos of animals, fungi, plants that they observe during their trips in nature or even in their garden. And even if they don't know anything about identification, they can directly find someone online who can help them identify. And if the person, the person allows it, we can also know the geographic coordinates and therefore know what we call observation record. So when and where the species was observed. And this is quite interesting because sometimes it can turn out that someone observed a very rare plant or insect or animal anywhere, you know, in Lebanon, and directly like, oh, whoa, where did you see that? This is crazy. We thought it was extinct. Um, I would say this happened with, I can give the example of a sage, a species of
Okay,
sage, which was
that's
described by,
cool. Yeah.
yeah, Ilna Saman and Ricardo Haber. And described the species. They identified it from Kfur, a region in Keserwan.
Okay.
And myself, I never observed the species since like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I think. And I've been in Kfur many times. I tried to to find it. And I think like I mean, from what I understood from me from Professor Saman, maybe the species was destroyed by construction projects in the region.
Okay.
Kfur. And one day on Facebook, one of the users just put a photo of the plants. I directly recognized it from a book that Professor Saman made. And it was obviously Sadia perusiana, and it was observed from Ehmej. And directly I got into contact with the user. She's called Samira Matta, and I'm very grateful to her for posting this photo because then we're able to. It's not a lot; it's only 2 plants, but we're able to find these plants and to try to initiate conservation of these of these species
Okay.
that we thought extinct. So yeah,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is. I think this is a good example in Lebanon about one plant that we thought extinct, and thanks to citizen science, we were able to spot it again.
Well, this is really cool, but I mean, I think I would add something to what you're saying, which is when you will do a reassessment, like in 10, 15 years, we don't know, but it's also important to have data for the common plants because it can alert you on a trend, on a declining trend. If you see that certain plants are not observed anymore or observed less and less, are becoming rare. And it can also reassure you on the population state of the common plants or the ones that were least concerned. So what I'm trying to say here is the interesting thing with citizen science is that you personally cannot be everywhere at once. And so a lot of this can be compensated if people are encouraged to basically document their observations on applications like a naturalist or other. So here, just a question by curiosity. That's kind of ridiculous, but I just thought about this. There's this Facebook group of the flora of Lebanon. Are the observations going into any database, and do you think it would be a good project to like if you get funding to hire someone to go into the group history and because I'm like, oh my God, all this data, every time I see something I see data flowing in front of me, and I'm like, who's gonna put this in a database? How are we gonna use this? Do you think it's a good idea? Because well, for insects it's less of a concern. Like for bees, I just ask people, did you catch it, and they say no, and then I'm disappointed and I move on. But I can't do much with pictures. But for plants,
Yeah.
this is so much data. Like, do you think this can be done?
Yeah, I mean, so as you said, unfortunately, the data flowing through Lebanon intakes on Facebook is not recorded directly. I mean, you don't have access. They should hire someone to do it. And I
Okay.
would say we should hire someone to upload it on iNaturalist because at the end, I mean, it's easier for all the scientists in the world to have one database where we can all go and find the data. I mean, if the data is spread all around, it's super difficult. And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
it
I
could be
agree.
a great project. It could be really, it's a good idea that you propose
Okay, well,
really.
if someone is listening, like, hit us up. And like to close this interview, what would you like to say to people who are interested in working on plants? It could be words of encouragement, or it could be things to take into account.
Yeah, I would conclude with another positive aspect, I would say. That since
Thank you.
the after like 13 years in conservation, I've seen a lot of progress. The wider public in Lebanon is more aware. It's very niche still. It's always people who maybe have more access to smartphones, to English. I mean, there's a huge progress. People understand the work of botany, of conservation, of nature reserve, and thanks to these apps like iNaturalist, more and more people are contributing. They contribute because they have their own curiosity. So yeah, I would push them and say thank you, and yeah, just continue. And I'm very happy to see the progress. And I will add another very important point is that all this work we've done so far with IUCN and all these plans that were assessed with Magda, with Professor Budar Kharat, we're not, I mean, we wanted to do what we call a red book, which summarize all the species in one little booklet. So it's easier for any user, anyone, just to open the book and find, okay, these and these species are endangered in Lebanon. Then rather than going on the website of IUCN and searching for each plant. which people don't know. People don't know what is IUCN. People don't know where to find information. And at the end, we never did it. And recently, I got contacted by Rami Malouf, and he proposed to me to do this booklet. And I'm very grateful because first someone not from the background, and I mean now is like very aware of all this, and is one of the contributors of our data. I mean, and it's very interesting because we were able to make this booklet, and this booklet at the end is a useful tool because people can use it and directly know which species are endangered in Lebanon. And this is
Yeah.
a major impact, I would say, I mean, talking about, wide public, how public can be aware and more like involved. This booklet for me is a very important tool.
Well, I'm gonna put the pre-launch link in the caption because it's not the print is not yet available to order, if I understand correctly, right? But it will be soon. I will scream about it on the socials once it's available to
No,
order.
no, don't worry. I think
Yeah, but I'm like
it's
gonna
really
run to the library and get my copy. Like it's been years since I've gotten excited about book because we had a phase like maybe 10 15 years ago where there was a bunch of publications on flora, and then it kind of stopped. So I'm so excited to see this happen soon. And yeah, this is a really cool example also because you just mentioned someone who started getting interested in plants as a hobbyist, so Rami, and who now got like very involved in botany and described a few species and is actively
exactly.
participating to this. So it's really cool. Well, thank you for doing this again. This
Thank
was really
you.
nice, and I hope this had a slightly different tone than the Arabic interview, which I feel was a bit more positive and cheerful. But but I think it's also important to highlight the difficulties that you can have in that kind of work and that kind of world, and all of this without discouraging people who want to go into this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nila. I'm so grateful that you're doing these types of interview. And as I mentioned before, it really opened up for me entire realm of researchers that are doing great activities and documentation. And I mean, working in Lebanon, and at the end, most of them, I mean, the main objective is to preserve
Yeah, but
the natural
that's really
patrimony.
cool.
So
Yeah.
thanks to you, and yeah, I mean, without this, I wouldn't be aware of all these actors. And as I mentioned before, so I think that we're not enough active on social media, and so our work doesn't have a lot of exposure. So this is great. Thank you so much.